This really started with my mom trying to help her just kind of stay in the loop and really get the content of her family. And then, sort of by accident, I just got involved with the communities, found a couple of customers through some personal relationships, sort of floated the idea to them that, hey, how are your residents communicating? How are they getting content? How are they interacting? Because there wasn't a lot of technology focused on that demographic. So, what started as a personal help my mom out became, okay, wow, I actually have a couple of customers right now. So Matt Smith, co-founder of Speak2. Speak2 has been in business for about 5 years. We basically provide a marketplace for senior housing. So think about assisted living, independent living. We provide a marketplace that provides content, services, products to the people, the residents who live in those communities. So often people move into those places, they're a little bit marginalized. With our platform, they have accessibility to get all the same things they used to get as consumers, they can now get in the senior housing community.
Very interesting. Two questions right off the bat about that. How did you get involved in this? Or where does this company come from in the sense of like, how did was it realized that we needed to service this industry? And
Mhm.
second of all, can you go a little bit deeper as to what that actually means practically? Like, what kind of services are we talking?
Sure. So the way this came about was really by accident. My mom was at home, wasn't able to communicate as well as she was when she was younger. We used to always call her, she would be sort of the center of attention. But when we all got smartphones, started texting, social media, she got out of the loop a little bit.
Mm,
So this really started with my mom trying to help her just kind of stay in the loop and stay, really get the content of her family.
mhm.
Um, and then, sort of by accident, I just got involved with the communities, uh, found a couple of customers through some personal relationships, sort of floated the idea to them that, hey, how are your residents communicating? How are they getting content? How are they interacting? Because there wasn't a lot of technology focused on that demographic. So what started as a personal help my mom out became, okay, wow, I actually have a couple of customers right now. Didn't really think of it as a business. Didn't think it was going to become a business. But then the need was there. I had been doing some consulting, similar in similar spaces in healthcare, and I realized, this is an actual need. There's not a lot of good software for people as they age, especially when they age into senior housing. They go from their home to, maybe a rehab or an assisted living. Uh, there's not software really designed for that. COVID hit, and it became sort of explosively different for people who were living in these communities. They really got marginalized in the sense that they couldn't even communicate. People couldn't visit them.
Hmm.
So the whole sort of industry woke up and said, we need software, we need technology to solve some of these problems. So that's how it kind of came about. Um, to be a little more specific about what we actually do, um, if you think about someone who lives at home, they're consuming products, via the web, via their TV, if they can use an app. We're all consuming most of our products through something related to technology. Um, you know, how do we get content? It's usually through TV, on our phone, even radio at this point is streaming. So when someone goes from that environment of being a consumer every day, all day, to suddenly moving into some place, very often not by their own choice, but because they have to, that consumer mentality, that consumer persona tends to go away. And now I'm in a place where my meals are provided for me, my entertainment's provided for me. I'm living in an apartment that maybe I'm just watching TV all day, and you're just sort of isolated. You become marginalized in a way that you haven't had your whole life. Um, that's a problem. It's people's self-determination, their self-worth, and their wellness deteriorates when they lose that consumer aspect of their lives. People, in our demographic, we're consumers without even thinking about it. But think about it, suddenly you were just told, not by your own choice, we're going to move you into this building, and you're not going to have access to these services anymore. We're going to tell you when you can get a ride and when you're going to see the doctor, and we're going to just kind of dictate to you what your daily life is like. For a lot of people, mentally, their acuity, they're not ready for that. They don't want that. Maybe physically, health wise, wellness wise, they need that kind of assistance, but they're not ready to give up their independence. So we provide a way for them to get all of those same things that they used to be able to get at home, but now in this sort of contained environment. They can get it through an app, they can get it through their TV, they can get it via Alexa or a tablet where they can just talk, say, I need help, I need a ride. And they don't have to necessarily use a smartphone. They can just use whatever is best for them. A lot of our residents are using a TV remote to get help, or they're just using an Alexa or a tablet. So we kind of meet people where they are in their wellness and in their acuity level, and we provide them the things that they should be able to get.
That's fascinating. What really hit me right off the bat is the fact that you said we're all consumers, even unintentionally. And I think the part of the consumerism is like a subconscious level of independence, like you were
Mhm.
saying. And if I was told I could no longer make choices,
Right.
the daily choices that we take for granted, it would very quickly feel like prison.
Yeah,
And that's really interesting how that could very much feel like that for the people that are in assisted living or elderly
exactly.
living or anything like that. I'm still trying to just dissect a little bit of what kind of services you mentioned car services and stuff
Mm.
like that. But so somebody, let's say hypothetically my grandparent is in a home and they want to use this service, right? What services would they have
Right.
access to?
It's a great question. The types of services we're talking about are, they need a ride to a doctor. It could be housekeeping, right?
Oh,
Hanging a picture on the wall, maintenance. My faucet doesn't work. Care. An OT or a PT coming in with some physical therapy. Um, there's all sorts of things that people are doing, especially as they age, that are essential. Even just think about food, right? Like, you move into a place, you're no longer deciding what restaurant to go to. You're getting the food from where you live. Uh, you know, what are my choices? Are there, most senior housing has a day-to-day menu that's the same every day, but then they'll have two or three entrees that are different. How do I order that food? Do I want it delivered? Am I pre-ordering for dine-in? Um, Care staff coming in and maybe helping with something medical. These are all services that you know become the only choices that someone in that environment actually has. Is I only have 10 or 12 things that I can ask for. How do I get them? uh, but then a lot of these places, especially on the independent living side, they have things like, a trip to the orchestra, right? A trip to the movies, a trip to the mall. You're buying tickets to something, or, entertainers are coming in, and, I want to go to that. I want to make sure I have a front row seat. These are all things that, can't really be easily managed via a clipboard, right? So pre-COVID and even over the last few years, a lot of these communities are still operating on paper, right? Which means that the only way someone who lives there can actually interact is to go ask someone for help. So you're constantly asking staff for help. Staff becomes overwhelmed, right? They get a lot of complaints, oh, I thought I asked for this. There's a lot of confusion. There's no tracking of anything. And then think about it as a family member. My parents are in an assisted living. I want to know what's going on with them. Did they go to this? What's available to them? Did they eat their meals? If everything's on a clipboard, how am I finding that information out as the person who's, the loved one caring for them? So that's why we wanted to digitize all this. Even if it's something simple like I want a ride to go shopping, right? uh, Make that request, schedule it in a place where everybody can see, let the family know mom's going to be out at 3 o'clock today shopping. Um, it provides a lot of ways for people to have more conversation too, right? Hey, if I know that mom was shopping and she went to the symphony, I can talk to her about those things. The grandkids can call and talk to her about those things because we know that that's what they did. So that's why we like to highlight it's a contained environment. There are certain things that you're not going to let the residents order, right? They're not going to just get an Uber to go to a movie anytime they want because they're there because they need to be kept safe. So we provide a way for the community to define the services that are
Mm.
available to the residents, as opposed to it just being consumer world where I can have anything.
So that was my follow-up question. My next question was going to be, is this facility unique? Like every facility having something different, but I guess you make a general platform and then they can decide what they want and what they don't want for their facility members.
Yeah, so as far as what services are available, it's kind of twofold. We have a library of like 1,000
Oh,
services,
wow.
right? These are the things that this industry typically provides. But communities can create their own or they can edit ours, right? So we might have, art class, but the community might call it something else, or art with Matt or something like that. So it's very flexible. We even have it down to the level of, is this something you charge for or not? The person can have a credit card on file for things that are, getting added to their bill, or just charge them on the credit card. Things like meals, if someone comes in and has a meal along with mom and dad or their aunt and uncle, how does that get charged, right?
Well,
So we have a library of all the services. They're typically pretty on target what we're providing, but people are always customizing them a little bit.
how was this not a thing beforehand is my follow-up question, because it seems like such a need and such an obvious business model. The next question that leads up to that is there a lot of competition in this industry then?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the thought of why didn't this exist before, it's really amazing. You look at a lot of industries and you just assume that they're going to have really modern technology,
Mm,
right? Shipping
sure,
industry, and
sure.
I really think that a lot of it was the owners and operators of senior housing are effectively real estate companies, right? They're not necessarily incented to provide high-end hospitality. You also have a demographic that, now baby boomers are aging into this. Baby boomers have very high expectations on how they're going to be treated, the amenities that they're going to have. The generation before that, the so-called greatest generation,
Mm,
they sit and suffer, right? They don't ask for a lot. They didn't grow up with technology. So for them to use clipboards and, get a piece of paper every day with the day's activities wasn't unusual because they sort of operated that way to begin with. And like I said earlier, COVID really put a light on the need for modernizing senior housing. A lot of buildings didn't have Wi-Fi, believe it or not. They wouldn't have, just basic infrastructure for technology. You'd go in and there'd be a computer at the front desk, and that would maybe be the only computer there. So it's really modernized over the last 5 or 6 years. Um, there's not a lot of people doing exactly what we're doing. Um, the big thing in senior living that people talk about is engagement. So there's this whole concept of, you know, keeping residents engaged keeps them happy and it keeps them living there, right? If you're not engaged, you're probably going to look at the place and say, why am I even living here? I want to go somewhere I'm going to have more fun or interact with people. So there was this proliferation of what they call engagement platforms, which are basically a calendar of events, someone taking attendance and letting the family know, hey, your mom and dad are they're going to things. We were really the first ones to come out with this concept of a marketplace. Baby boomers moving in expect a lot more. They want choices, they want services, they want to be able to ask for them. They want to know the status. If they made a maintenance request, they don't want to have to go down to the front desk and say, what happened to my maintenance request, right? They want to go on their TV or their app or ask Alexa, what's the status of my maintenance request? And they want an answer right away. So I think it's partly an antiquated, model, partly the fact that it was really more of a real estate industry, but also the demographic that they were serving didn't really demand something like what we're doing now, whereas that's changed, pretty rapidly.
very interesting. I like what you said about the real estate companies owning these businesses. I mean, if you just drive around, you'll see a typical like Fairfield or all these things. They're just
Yeah,
typical real estate companies that happen to have run the business of a
yeah,
like elderly care home or something like that,
yeah.
assisted living home. Interesting.
It's really it's interesting for us as a vendor because uh, we have so many people that we're trying to appeal to at once. We have the resident and the resident family, right? So we have to appeal to them that we're providing them something of value. We're also appealing to the people who work in the community. And the people who work in the community typically look at themselves as care staff, right? They're caring for people. They're more on a mission.
Yeah,
They're not doing it to get rich. They're doing it
yeah, yeah.
because they love taking care of people. The owners and the people paying are in the real estate business. They're renting apartments. Um, you know, we struggle because we try to position it as you're not really renting an apartment, you're renting an apartment with services, right? If I was just getting an apartment, I could go to an apartment building. I'm moving in here because of the care, because of the food, because of the atmosphere, because of the social environment. So I think that's the other thing that happened, with the industry is the industry itself is growing up to recognize we are a services business. We're not a real estate business. We're providing services to people, one of which is the apartment. Um, but it's a struggle because their financial model, and most of these are REITs, their financial model is, rental.
And most of these are what?
REITs, REIT, it's a real estate investment
Oh,
trust.
okay.
So, Yeah, I'm like talking shop as if
No,
everybody
please,
knows
yeah.
what a REIT is. Yeah,
But I'm happy to ask questions
yeah,
still.
yeah. But they're basically real estate ownership groups, and
The people that own the facilities.
yes.
Sure.
So they're not necessarily hands-on looking at and
Sure.
saying, hey,
It's one of 35.
yeah, they have
Sure.
they have a whole portfolio of real estate,
Yeah.
and it's hard to kind of get them to notice and say, if you actually provide services, people won't move out. If you actually are engaged and you have people who are really invested in this community as a culture, they're going to stay longer. You're going to have to spend less on marketing because people are going to know that this is the place to move into. The high-end luxury buildings typically have waiting lists for years because people know that's where I want to move in. It's almost a status symbol of where you're going to be able to move in, but that is now kind of moving throughout the entire ecosystem. So it's definitely an interesting thing as a vendor because you know we're building a product for the senior living resident to engage with to live a better life, but the person we're selling it to is a real estate owner. So it's a pretty complex environment.
How do you manage that gap?
It's a huge struggle. I mean, people have actually spoken to me recently and said, how did you figure this out? I don't know that we have. I think a lot of it is doing things like this, talking about the industry and, trying to communicate to people and get the message out that we're providing something that appeals to a lot of people and there is a real ROI to it. I mean, if you can appeal to residents so that when they move in, they feel that they're getting a high-end hospitality style, personalized, experience in the apartment, you can charge more for the apartment. The apartment stays empty much shorter. People stay longer. There's a huge ROI to all that for the real estate people, right? Um, in the past, they've looked at it and said, am I really going to spend money on this calendar program? Or all these things that people come in and say we're going to make it a lot better for you if you use our software. So there's a lot of skepticism, but we've been lucky because we've been able to prove an ROI.
Is it a hard sell at this point, or is it like it's
It
still
is.
yeah?
It is. It's a hard sell, um, mainly because you don't know who to talk to sometimes. You
Mhm.
know, I'm talking to someone who runs a building. You think, okay, this is the person who's going to want this. That's great if they want it. They don't have any budget power. They're not going to say, well, I'll spend the money on this every month. They have to fly it up the flagpole to the C-level people, and then maybe even they have to fly it up the flagpole to the real estate owners. Um, and the real estate owners don't go to the, they're not going to all the events. They're not coming in and visiting, the buildings very much. So it's hard to actually identify the actual buyer in this industry. We've gotten better at it, but I think in general, as an industry, they would serve themselves better. They will have a more successful industry if they figured some of this out internally.
Isn't it a frustrating? How do I phrase this? Isn't it a frustrating? I don't know. But essentially, when you have something that you know will benefit
Mhm.
your customer, and even if they have to spend money up front, you know that the ROI is worth it, and it's just trying to get them to convince it.
Yeah.
There are some, maybe every business owner feels that way, right? But there are some industries where it's more like a convenience or a luxury, but there are ones that it's like, no, this will actually benefit your business. You
Yep.
just have to, change the
Yeah.
way you think.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's always good to keep things positive, right? But there is an element in senior living and in just elder care where there's a lot of predatory behavior, and it's not just at the person who's aging; it's at the industry itself.
In what
Um,
sense?
so we have a lot of these consulting companies that kind of dip into all buckets of money, um, and it doesn't really serve the industry well. So, as an example, you might have a consulting company go talk to a real estate owner and say, "Hey, I can help you with technology. I'm going to help find the right tools for you to make your buildings more efficient." And then those consultants might be on the board of two or three software companies, and they're getting paid on the back end. And then they recommend those companies to work in those buildings, and everyone's being financially compensated, but is it really the best solution for the industry? And I think the issue we have is that the industry isn't mature enough yet from an operational perspective and a technology perspective to vet that out, right? So if you go to a bank and a consultant comes in and says, I'm going to recommend software to you, one of the first questions that they'll ask is, are you in any way compensated by these companies that you're recommending? And the answer has to be no, right? No one's asking that question in senior housing. It just it's happening rampantly. It's happening a lot. And then, we get burned on our end
Hmm.
because they've already invested in two or three software platforms that didn't work out. And now they're really skeptical of us.
Hmm.
We're independently owned. We're not working with consultants. We're not, compensated in any other way than our customers paying us.
Yeah.
So we're kind of sticking to that and hoping that the industry recognizes that and starts asking those types of
Yeah.
questions when they vet it out.
With the rise of influencer marketing, just to piggyback on what you're saying, it is an interesting debate or topic of this compensation for recommendation,
Mhm.
because at this point it's really hard to believe what people actually recommend anymore, whether
Yeah,
it be for a restaurant, whether it be for a product online, whether it be for a camera,
yeah,
whether it be for assisted living, right?
yeah.
Because at this point there's I mean, not that there's influencers in assisted living, but it's the same concept.
There are
It's
actually, yeah,
yeah, well, I guess very interesting. Well, it's the idea of commission work,
yeah.
or the commission work or affiliate work is another way to say it, like, and it's what do you believe? What's real? Is this actually a good product, or are you just going to get paid on the back end because of it?
100%. And it's interesting you talk about the influencer economy because it has drifted into an industry like senior living. So, there'll be a conference, right? And you look at who's organized this conference, and it's a for-profit conference. Like people are getting people to come together, and it's all under the guise of innovation and
Yeah.
wellness and all these other things. But everyone's paying to be there, including the vendors, right? So it's a for-profit conference bringing people together. Is there benefit? I'm sure there is. There are a lot of people talking and innovating and hopefully advancing the whole industry. But when you look at it, you say, okay, everyone's making money here except probably the vendors. The vendors are also paying to be there. So does it benefit an industry to have a large amount of people who are trying to benefit your industry kind of be, I hate to say it, but like, suckered into spending all their money at these conferences and events that aren't going to lead to sales, right? So they're getting burned on the vendor side. The ownership's getting burned because they're not being recommended the right tools. So really, no one's being helped. So you know, as a company, Speak2 has avoided that whole ecosystem. We did it for a couple of years. I come from a consulting background. I've been through a lot of this. I just looked at it and said, I see what's going on here. We need to find some early adopters who actually believe in our product and then let them tell other people in the industry what they know. And I really feel like the way we're building trust is by not participating in all that.
Mm.
We're not coming in with a robot and saying, hey, this robot's going to be the greatest thing that you've ever seen. It's going to help your residents, cure loneliness. And they have all the best intentions, but we have 30,000 users, so we can have talk to our users, talk to our ownership groups, talk to our customers, talk to the families. That proves things out a lot better than going to a conference
Sure.
and getting recommended by a consultant who's probably being paid on both ends.
So is that what marketing looks like? A lot of just word of mouth, or do you actually do a bit of active marketing? How do you acquire new
Yeah,
customers?
so acquiring new customers for us has been interesting. We don't really spend a lot on marketing. So it's been mostly word of mouth. Early on, we tried to do some of the event-based things. It just didn't pan out. Um, we basically build really close relationships with our customers, and then we flat out ask them, hey, do you know anyone else that might be interested in this? A lot of people in this industry have worked, at other, companies, and they know people. So really, it has been primarily word of mouth where we've grown. We do a little bit of marketing. We put out a blog and we do some inbound, put the blog out, connect with people on LinkedIn and on social media, and hopefully they see our content and reach out to us. But that's not typically how we actually get business. So we've done some like awareness, campaigns. But as far as actually getting customers, I'd say it's probably like 90% word of mouth.
Hmm. Just on a marketing term, I'm curious if you, because I assume that the most, no, I'm assuming the way you go with typically is trying to find the C-level suite or the decision makers, right?
Mm.
But if you had enough people on the bottom level, like the end user, the consumer, ask for it, do you think that that would be something that would end up getting to the chain, or do you think that it's
Yeah.
just there's so much red tape that'd be like, yeah, okay, sure, we'll get to it, kind of thing?
So it's interesting so it's amazing actually. You like, kind of read my mind a little bit. We actually just recently started two separate campaigns. The messaging to the communities that we work with is vastly different than the messaging towards the ownership groups. The ownership groups want to know, net operating income, ROI, what's the real reason why I would do this from their financial perspective. Um, the communities, we're just talking about how we help people and we make their lives easier. So if you're staff and you're going in there and you're caring for people and you're working, an 8-hour shift or sometimes a 12-hour shift, and someone comes in and says, if you use our app, I'm going to make it really easy for you to track all your work. You don't have to go back and type it all in at the end of the day. That resonates. You're going to save me time. You're going to give me insight. When I walk into this apartment, I can look at the app and I can see all the different things about this person. I can have a little summary, and now I can sit down and have a conversation with the person. If you're an administrator of the building and you want a dashboard to say, who are my at-risk residents, at risk to fall, at risk to move out, who's not going to meals, that really resonates. None of those talking points resonate with the ownership, right? So we are actually doing exactly what you said. We're putting out content. We're sending them gifts, sending them little boxes with, little booklets in them, just to kind of say, we're here. We appreciate what you're doing. We think we can help. Reach out and let us know if we can help you.
Hmm.
Completely separate from,
Very
hey,
interesting.
ownership. We're gonna, your turnaround time on an apartment's gonna go down to, a month if you have us in
Yeah.
there.
What's something that would surprise people about your industry?
Something that would surprise people about our industry, I think, is the amount of people in this industry that are almost on a mission. Like the people who work in these buildings are unbelievable people. Like they're beautiful people. They are caring for people that other people don't want to care for.
Hmm.
They're putting on, daily events. They're giving meals. They're stopping in and talking to someone and spending 20 minutes just talking to someone, learning more about them. Uh, the people who work in senior housing are amazing people. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They almost don't even realize that it's an industry. It's like until you have someone who moves into a building, you're kind of like, what is that? What is that Brookdale that I keep driving by? And it just seems like this little house that people might live in, and I don't really know what's going on in there. They're just amazing people who just have huge hearts,
Hmm.
who are just caring for people. And I wish more people knew about that. I wish that was publicized more, and these people became sort of, heroes in their neighborhoods,
Hmm.
as opposed to just sort of like, hey, I'm just going to my job.
Yeah. The quiet worker that nobody ever thinks about.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
If somebody was sending their parents to an assisted living or elderly care, what would be things to look out for? Or what would be things to look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're looking to move, a loved one in, you absolutely need to visit the place, not when it's scheduled. You need to just pop in. You need to go in and see what the environment is like, what the grounds look like, how clean is it, you know, and you also have to align that with your loved one's, acuity level. So if you think about it, you could go to when I was looking for my parents, you walk into a community on the day of a tour, everything looks amazing. People are playing games. There's hitting a beach ball around. There's music. Uh, Feels really lively. If you go there a couple of days later, 10 in the morning, you might see 15 people in a wheelchair just sitting in the lobby asleep. And you have to think, what are my parents going to be doing? If my loved one is going to be sitting in the lobby sleeping, this might be fine, right? They might get really good care. It's not a negative. It might mean that all the staff took everybody out and got them fresh air and talked to them for 15 minutes and they fell asleep in their chair, and that's where they want to be. Nothing wrong with that. But if your parents are the type that, they want to be playing games, they want to take rides, they're really active, they want to be interacting with people their own age or their own, energy level, you have to find that out. Again, any of it might be right for the right person, but you need to go when they're not expecting you to see what it's really like to be there
Mm.
every day.
What would be something to look out for in the industry?
Something to look out for in the industry, I think, is um, really trying to understand who is here because they truly believe that what they're doing is helping people, and who is here to make money in a predatory manner. Um, this industry is getting pretty big, believe it or not. I mean, there's a lot of VC money going into things like fall detection and robotics
Mm.
and things like that. The reason being is that the baby boomer generation has a lot of money. they're living longer, and they have high demand. So you have this big demographic, this big wealthy demographic aging into this. Um, so people are they have they're ready to make some money on this, and a lot of it can just be, we're looking to make money,
Mhm.
and is this really going to help people? Who cares?
Yeah.
Let's get them to buy this product, put it in here. I'll sell to a private equity, and I'm out.
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen, and I've seen some of the money that's being raised. I know a company that has raised over $100 million for fall detection. If you've raised $100 million, that means that your exit needs to be about $1 billion to get that 10x result. Your investors want 10x on their investment. I'm not sure there's $1 billion fall detection product out there. So, I look at that and I say, how did this happen? Right? There's got to be some shell game going on to some extent. People will get mad at me.
What does that mean? Tell me more about that.
Well, just kind of making promises that, aren't real, right? I mean, the concept that I'm going to put some sensors in a room and I'm going to literally, prevent someone from falling. I just don't know if that's real, right? You might gather data that alerts people of the potential for a fall. So you do some interventions. Um, but there's not going to be automated, my 85-year-old mother's not going to fall because of all this information I'm gathering, right? So some of that liability and that risk and the cost around all that, there's this promise that we're going to fix this problem for you. And it may not be today, but maybe a year from now or 2 years from now. And I just don't know how realistic that
Mhm.
is. And if it is, fantastic. Let's prevent people from falling, right? But $100 million, that's a really big investment that, I'm not seeing a path to that
Yeah.
anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, $1 billion company would have to probably be in every single assisted living home in
There's
America.
and there aren't enough customers that you're going to make $1 billion on it.
Very interesting.
It would have to become a consumer product,
Mm.
and have something like an Amazon or a Google or something take it to market,
Hmm.
which that
Sure.
maybe they plan to sell to
Yeah.
an Amazon or something
I mean,
like that.
telling Alexa you think you might fall, and
Right.
you know they
Exactly.
call 911, whatever.
Right.
Very, I mean, look very plausible, but still, I mean, $1 billion. It's a lot of sales.
Exactly.
It's a
So
lot of sales.
that's why I say it's not a bad mission. The technology might be excellent, but the financials don't work out.
Yeah,
So that's where I'm
absolutely.
skeptical about it.
Yeah, for sure. So now, one of the goals with this podcast is talking a bit more of the business side of things. Where one of the reasons I started the podcast is because I want. It's hard to communicate with most people because most people aren't entrepreneurs. So we don't speak the same. We don't have the same problems. We don't have,
Right.
So speaking with other entrepreneurs, it's like, oh, I never thought about that. Or we're in totally different industries, but that marketing idea can apply in my, right. So I like learning from the lessons of other entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs go through seasons where they think the business might not make it, or they might fail. Can you tell me about a story or a season when you thought the business wasn't going to make it, or it
Sure.
might have failed, and what the outcome? Obviously, you didn't. So
Right.
talk to me about
Yeah, I
that.
mean, luckily for us, we've got past that 5 year. It's
Yeah,
like if you get past
yeah.
5 years, you're
80%
successful.
of businesses
Yeah,
fail in the first 5 years.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think with us, what was interesting was identifying where the industry was at, uh, sort of too late. Like had I understood where the industry was, I probably would have waited before I started turning this into like a real business, right? So helping my mom and helping out a handful of friends that worked in the industry, that could have been like a side job, or as I was doing consulting, I could have also had a software company, on the side. Um, the opportunity was also the barrier. The opportunity was no one is doing anything like this. So that's the
Sure.
opportunity. But the barrier was, why isn't anybody doing anything like this? And it's because they just didn't see the need. And it took a couple of years it's almost like we were just way ahead of where the industry was
Well,
at.
it's like that technology curve, the adoption of technology,
Mhm.
where it's like very the early adopters
Yeah.
and this, and then it goes hyperbolic, right? And then it kind of caps out. But
Yep.
being here at an industry point where it's like this is a really great idea, it's just we have to wait it out until we can get to here.
Exactly. It's a crossing the chasm, right? So there's a book, Crossing the Chasm, that talks about all this, and that's exactly where we were at. We early on, the scary moment was, people just not getting it. People, we would demonstrate what we had and kind of talk about the value proposition almost in a consultative way. And the questions we would get back would sort of be indicative that, this was just not even, they just weren't even
Conceptual.
absorbing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
or just getting the answer, well, we don't have Wi-Fi, and saying, oh, wow, like, finding out that half the industry, half my potential customers don't even have Wi-Fi, right? So there was a period of time for about a year and a half, right around the COVID into maybe up to 2022, where the growth was just, non-existent. We
Hmm.
were just basically living off of, we weren't living off of our own revenue. We were just investing. My co-founder and I financed this business ourselves, so we didn't even have outside funding.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, there was a couple of years there where we thought, this industry is just never going to do this. Luckily, we found a couple of early adopters. We started to eliminate potential customers based on profiling them as, you're not going to do this. Like, here's where you're at in your technology continuum, and until you're here, if you
The
it doesn't
barrier
there's
to
no
entry
point in
is,
us
yeah.
talking to you, right? You don't have Wi-Fi, there's no point in us talking to you. You don't have, your staff doesn't use phones, right? Believe it or not, right now there are a lot of care staff walking around with beepers, like beepers.
So, you want to hear something crazy? My wife works in healthcare, one of the largest healthcare providers in the state and in the country, actually. And just this year, they went from using these beeper style systems. I'm talking the biggest, New York
Yeah,
State's biggest employer.
yeah,
They just this year went from using beepers. They call them voiceras, where it's like a little
yeah.
beep.
I
You
know
can call
I
it,
know the company. Yeah,
to getting iPhones.
yep,
Just this year.
I know. So think about it. I'm walking in 2022 with what
Yeah.
I think is a game-changing technology. It's going to make you more money. ROI, the residents, everyone's going to love this. Some people would look at it and say, "That's fantastic. That's amazing. I don't have Wi-Fi, and does it work with a beeper?" And I feel like, you have a beeper. Um, but to your
Yeah.
point, I mean, we still have customers that are using beepers
Yeah.
or walkie-talkies.
So right now you're a vendor to these companies.
Mhm.
Is the company ever considering opening up their own facilities?
Our company?
Yeah.
No, no, no. So what's interesting is, well, I find it interesting is, people look at senior care, and it's a confusing business model, in the sense that many people think of it as, you're providing care, you're providing medical care. But like I said, it's really real estate. And depending on who you ask, they'll answer the question of what is this business differently. For us, we're really focused on software. My background is software and consulting. Um, and we think that, you know, eventually, whether it's us or people like us, this is going to become ubiquitous. Everyone's going to expect something like this. So our focus right now is just providing the best platform that we can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any industry trends or consumer trends that are hurting your industry at the moment?
That's a great question. So things that are hurting not only the industry but us specifically are, uh, sort of the confusion between enterprise and consumer software. Um,
What does
everybody
that mean? How would you define enterprise?
So everybody has an iPhone, right? And they have apps on their phone. But when you get into what, a business scenario where you're deploying to staff who work for a company, um, you know, there are certain things that you have to do to secure the data, that sort of limit the capabilities of the software, right? So as an example, we're HIPAA compliant, right? So we have to separate out data from a resident that we find something out about that can't be exposed necessarily to all staff, and we have to have security layers around all that. Um, People are used to kind of just downloading an app and just using it on their phone, and they don't expect to be trained on it.
Sure.
When was the last time you opened up a user guide for any app on your phone? You just start using it. Um, our clients tend to want to be trained, right? They say, well, you have to show us how to do this. And we say, well, it's an app on your phone. Open it up, start using it. It's almost a simplified app because we have some constraints around some of the data and things like that. So what's frustrating is we're trying to roll out what we think is sort of something that people can just open up and start using. But the expectation of an enterprise customer is you're going to hold our hands. You're going to train us. You're going to come in and work with us. We can't do this unless you show us how to do it. And we're kind of like, but you all have a phone in your hand and no one has trained you on how to do any of that. Why do you need to be trained on this?
So it's really that easy to use the app.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, a lot of it comes down to culture. You know, um, change is a big, people don't like change. So, we tell them to download an app and they open it up and they look at it and they say, now I'm going to have to change how I was doing things. So then what they'll say is, no one showed me how to use this, right? Oh, now you need to come in and train me how to use this. And 9 times out of 10, what we do is we just say, open up the app, send a message to all the residents. And they look at it, they see the little icon and they know that that's the message. They type it in and they hit send and say, you didn't really need us to be here for this, but that's the expectation. So we spend a lot of time and money on training people and being on site and showing them how to do stuff that they probably could figure out on their own, but the industry just isn't there yet on that.
What's something that everybody in your industry knows, but most consumers and customers outside of the industry don't know?
Oh boy, everything that we do um, is in the service of someone who's aging, and you have to understand and have an empathy for what it's like to go through the aging process. And people outside of the industry tend to not appreciate that level of attention that's needed to provide care for someone. So, I mean, I have it, just in my family and ecosystem. People will say, mom was great yesterday. What do you mean she fell and hit her head? She was great yesterday, but she probably has 3 or 4 hours where she's really great, and then she starts to trail off a little bit. Hydration, right? Dad was great. I talked to him. He was really sharp. He seems like he's perfectly fine. Well, he didn't have enough water. He got dehydrated, tried to get up, and fell. It's simple dehydration. If you know aging, you know that hydration is really important. You know that there's an amount of time that someone's going to have, and that their nutrition is really important. Um, People who are not in the industry related to aging tend to just not be aware of those things, and they treat people who are aging like they treat everyone else.
Mm.
And as a result, you have a lot of things like falls and just wellness issues. So I think it's really just an awareness of like that aging is a thing that you have to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having the empathy alongside that.
Yeah, empathy is, I would say, I mean, I've been consulting, I've done software for other industries. You always want to have empathy as a consultant, just as inherently, but in this industry, if you don't walk in the door with a lot of empathy, you might as well just not be
Yeah.
in the industry.
When you say consulting, what were you doing before this?
It was typically technology consulting, helping people with, adopting new systems, building software. I've had other companies where, we built a software platform and then, had someone bigger take it over. But a lot of it was just, solving business problems, supply chain, workflows, things like that. What I would call, things that you can make money on that aren't really helping a lot of people, helping a bank make more money or helping a healthcare company, switch from, walkie-talkies to iPhones. That's a heavy lift, right? And there's a big technology project to do there. That's the type of consulting that I did.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
A bit of a shift of industry.
It is, but
Or mission, I guess.
yeah, what's interesting is really the mission is really what shifted.
Yeah,
It's
similar industry. But
a lot of the same thought processes go, but this is the first company that I had that was truly like a SaaS software company. Just people paying a monthly fee to get access to the software, and everybody has the same software.
Is there a lot of overhead?
There's not. I think the beautiful thing about where we're at now, technology-wise, is you can build a software product pretty inexpensively. You can get it deployed and production ready, for like what used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now you're talking about, a few $1,000s,
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
especially now with AI. I mean,
Followed up right into my next question was there's a lot of talk of AI, obviously, and I think to even to some degree, I think people have this like conversation fatigue about AI. It's talked about everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And, like you comes up, you're like, oh, another conversation, right? But
Right.
I am curious how it is affecting your industry, how you, if you plan to utilize it, if you don't, or what we're talking about that.
Yeah. So a couple of levels on that. So first and foremost, we use AI for coding. So we use Claude, we use Cursor. There are tools that just accelerate your coding. So we've been using those for years. Um, Now with Claude Code, which is just like light years better than everyone else, and I have no reason to say that other than that I believe that. Um,
I mean, you're the second person that just, I mean, somebody a week ago just told me the same exact
yeah,
thing.
it's unbelievable. You can build out features, literally within hours. That would take, me writing it down, creating a Figma design, passing it along, project management. I mean, things that would take weeks or months, you can literally do in a day.
I mean, the previous guest, two guests ago, was saying how he ran out of money because the coder was so expensive. Then all of a sudden, Claude Code came out, and he's
Yeah,
like, I don't even need the guy anymore.
yeah.
I just did it myself.
We built a whole module for managing vendors that I built in Claude Code, and it's deployed. It sends emails. It sends text. I mean,
Oh, that's
it's
crazy.
incredible. So on that level, because I have this other part, there's the angel and the devil on my shoulder. There's a lot about AI that I don't like. It
What
has,
don't you like about AI?
I don't like that, data centers, it's like you're taking entire lakes of water and just like ruining the water. So I think there's a lot of impact. Uh,
Hmm.
the amount of energy that's needed for the demand uh, is not realistic. I mean, when people talk to me about investing in AI, I'm like, invest in energy, invest in clean energy, because I think the output of AI is going to be the oil lobbies are finally going to lose, and we're going to end up getting some sort of clean energy built, because the only way that we can sustain this is with clean energy, because otherwise we're burning so much fuel so that someone can like create an AI image of their cat playing volleyball. It's like there's too much nonsense AI that's become available to the public that I can just go on my phone and just create a whole bunch of pictures, for $20 a month. That's churning in these data centers multiplied by millions and millions of people. Like, what's the human value there? So I think there's a big trade-off between you know coding in AI that has some business value, that is sort of contained to like the coding environment and the coding ecosystem, as opposed to every consumer out there having an app on their phone that's going to summarize every conversation. You know, every Zoom call I do, every email. Do you want me to summarize your email? I'm like, the email is a summary. That's what someone just emailed me, right? Do I really need every Zoom
Well,
call
so
summarized?
you're saying even now, not only even just consumer use of AI being wasteful, just general waste of AI use that's called a waste of energy.
Yeah, I question the
That's
need for
very,
it.
very, very interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I just I feel like
With every well, because what's happening is every single business is chasing out there to make it. I mean,
yeah,
what AI has become is this at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to some degree a convenience factor.
sure,
Let's just make everything more convenient,
right,
and not that there's anything wrong with it. I mean, look, like what used to take me, I do a lot of photo and video work. What used to take me hours in a photo of having to draw around every
right,
single person,
yeah,
like dot to
yes,
remove an image. You just click it now and boom, it's got like that's pretty sweet. And that can save
yes,
me a lot of time and a lot of money because I don't have 2 to 3 hours of work that I
right,
just done in 30 seconds, right?
yeah,
So there's that side of it, right? But then at the same time, like, do I really need an email summarized for me?
exactly. So that's the question that I have for it now is,
Very interesting.
when you look at the whole piece of it and you say there are some really useful things, like like you said, photo editing, coding. There are things that provide true business value. That time that you're getting is now more time with your kids, right?
Absolutely. There's
So
no question about
yeah,
that.
and but then there's the other side of it, which is like, do you want to turn on the AI assistant for your Zoom call? Like, for what?
Yeah.
So that I can share it with someone who's really reading that AI. So I just question that,
Hmm.
those kinds of uses that seem to be frivolous,
Yeah.
and then also the cost, right? So I'm paying, I think, whatever it is, $200 a month for Claude Code. There's no way that this cost model can perpetuate, right? Like, it costs these companies way more than what they're currently charging. They're flooding the market because they're backed up by a lot of money. OpenAI loses a ton of money, right? So they're literally losing money, but everyone's like, oh, this is AI is free almost, right? It almost feels free to use a lot of these models, but it's not free. So at some point, this cost model is going to blow up, the bubble will burst, and it's going to be like, oh, it actually costs $6,000 for Claude Code.
Or do you think we get to the point on the opposite end where an AC unit used to be $1,000, and
Mhm.
now you can buy one for $50.
I think that's possible if it becomes a commodity, right? So if
In
AI
what
becomes a
sense?
commodity like the electric grid or water systems, right? The government ends up, you know, making this just a commodity that we all have access to data centers and
Wow.
AI, then sure, it'll
I
the
mean, that
cost will go
doesn't seem
down.
unrealistic.
No, I mean I think that's probably where eventually this does end up going. The
But then
current
the government now has control over AI.
Well, not necessarily over AI, but over the function of a data center and the regulation of the models, right? So models can't burn more energy than a
Oh,
certain
interesting.
amount, right? Just like energy now, right? Like you pay more if you leave your air conditioner on all night, which makes the air conditioner companies make them more efficient, right? So there's this whole ecosystem that could come of this, like other technologies. Right now, and nothing with politics, but this administration is they're just running rampant, right? So they're able to do whatever they want to do. At some point, it's either going to explode in a negative way, that it's going to burst in a negative way, or it's going to get regulated, where the models go through some sort of testing, energy consumption is regulated, and then it could become a commodity that we can all benefit from. I'm hopeful that that's actually where it goes.
I don't. I mean, look, this is totally just my opinion, but I don't. I don't foresee it becoming that Claude becomes $6,000. I just think that there's become such a market, and say, like they've accustomed people to this
Yeah.
as so much that I just don't think that. I think people would just be like, I'm not using it anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would do that. I would pay $6,000
Sure.
because I have a company that
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm paying, otherwise I'm paying 4 or 5 humans that
Yeah,
amount of money,
sure.
right? There's another ethical part of that. But let's just say from a business perspective, I can pay 200, 500, 2,000. If they hiked up that price, I would probably pay it,
As I would,
right?
but
But most people wouldn't, right? And then your consumption goes down, and then the business model of how they're making money also has to change, right? And then it can become regulated and be more like a commodity. This is not my full area of expertise. I do a
it's a
lot with
fascinating
AI.
conversation though.
Yeah, and I mean I'm heavily invested in where this is going. We use AI for summaries, but the model that we have is very specific to here's what we absolutely know about this person and what would help a caregiver or people caring for them to know, right? They missed a meal. Here are 20 things that we know, data points that we know about this person. Put it in a sentence. That's really valuable because now that person doesn't have to go through the 20 data points, right?
That's also real world value of summary. Hey,
Exactly.
this person missed a meal 3 days in a row. Like,
Right.
that's actually pretty
Yeah,
useful
let's look into
information.
this. Yeah, like we need to check on this person, right?
Yeah,
And maybe there's something else going on with them.
yeah.
And for the
Very
family to
different than a
know.
family Zoom call or even a business Zoom call that like,
Exactly, right? Or just I mean the amount of images that are generated that are
sure.
just nonsense, right? And I do it. I do it to be funny sometimes. I had the Knicks stuff going on, and I made a few pictures of me on the Knicks. It's fun, but at some point, this has to balance out at some point.
What's interesting though is the lack of information that's out there of don't throw your stop using plastic straws because it's killing the turtles. Like
Right?
nobody's considering, myself included, is considering any of the use
No,
aspect of using AI,
no,
which is just an interesting. You can't even fault the consumer because they don't even know.
they don't know. It's like cigarettes, right? Like we didn't know it was bad, so everybody smoked. I think this is a similar thing, and as the data centers go up, it's like prisons, right? I don't want the data center near me, right? I want the AI, but put the data center somewhere else, and then you get into some socioeconomic issues. So it's a really
Wow, very
complex
interesting.
problem. And it's funny because there are people who are like, I don't care, I like plastic straws, right? So there's a freedom aspect to it, and the First Amendment, Second Amendment type stuff. Or maybe not second, but yeah, it's fascinating. I feel like there's an ethical piece around AI that is being ignored right now, and a lot of it is just because it's new and it's early. But at some point, this has to balance
Oh,
out.
I think on a very different level, like a smaller capsulized level. You mentioned the fact that you were a music teacher for a little.
Mhm.
I don't know if you taught music as everything or just in the one year you were. You mentioned that you taught in my town for 1 year.
Yeah, I was a music teacher for a couple of years. I was a music major in
Okay,
college. Yeah.
okay, so this would resonate then. I have a music background. I did music for many, many years, professionally, and the way I liken AI is very much to when autotune came out.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
or even just a digitization of music when
that's a great comparison.
everything was analog for so long. synthesizers, everything, or recording equipment, everything was analog. All of a sudden, digital equipment comes out, and you can have access to any sound you want
Yep.
on one keyboard.
Yep.
It just got ridiculous. And human nature is we use it to the excess, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is ridiculous now.
Right.
Let's pull it back.
Yeah.
And then, like, we go on this pendulum swing, and
Yeah.
it's no different than AI. Like, that's why every single musician forever or for a very long time we had the bubblegum pop where everything was fake and
Hmm.
nobody was actually singing and everything was perfectly auto-tuned. And now you look at the industry and it's like significantly swung back. It's like, I
Yeah.
don't want that. I actually want to hear a wrong note because it's a real person, right?
Right.
And I think with AI, we are in that pendulum swing of like, wow, this is so cool. Let me take a picture of my cat doing volleyball. And then now at some point, it's going to be like, okay, let's
Yeah.
actually really use this
I,
usefully,
that's a
tastefully.
that's a great metaphor. I mean, I really like that, and I do think that that is what's going to. I'm hoping that it happens not only from the consumer perspective, but from the bigger perspective of, the difference with the music stuff, the auto tune and all that is that industry wasn't going to destroy our
Again, it was a
ecosystem.
very small
Yeah,
capsule
right.
concept idea.
But I think you're dead on in the sense that eventually people say, okay, this is kind of dumb, right? Like every singer sounds exactly the same. I can't even tell the difference anymore. Every drum machine is, literally everything. For a few years, you're right, everything was the same. Now you have a lot of live rock bands. You have a lot of, you know, a lot of what I'm getting into now musically is some of these bands, especially some of these girl bands that are just like rocking out, and they're just. I'm always seeing them live, and I'm like, this is great. This is more of like what I grew up with. So I am hopeful that that's what happens with AI. I just hope that the government at some point can step in and put some regulation.
Yeah. I'm really into the agriculture industry. I manage a small farm part time, and what I find interesting is I'm getting a lot of these like upstate New York larger pieces of land, pieces of social media where people like they're looking to buy 100,000 acres and ruin these farms. And
Yeah,
I don't know enough information to speak on it, but
yeah,
like it's very interesting when like these data centers are like, oh yeah, they just bought 15 farms up in New York State that used to produce milk and
yeah.
food, and now where is that coming from? And that's a whole nother ethical question of like, well, where are we going to get our food from?
Yeah, I mean, where are we going to get our food from? What's going to happen to the animals in the area? What's going to happen to the
The
water in
water
the area?
system, yeah.
And then you think about it, upstate New York. I mean, that's what feeds New York City's water, right? So, depending on, I guess, how high it is, but the ecosystem can only handle so much. Um, I think it's one of those things where it's hard to talk about without it turning into a political conversation, because it turns into ethics, morals, beliefs, um, versus kind of like money, progress, advancement. And I've straddled this weird line because I'm using AI heavily, and I talk about AI a lot.
Well,
But
it almost feels like a selfish conversation. Well, I need it, but that person doesn't need it, right? And how
exactly,
do you define that
right,
level?
right, which happens a lot with a lot of these types of
Sure.
things, right? It's like, you know, I mean, you point about music. I mean, I remember when I got Logic Pro and
Sure.
I like downloaded every sound
Yeah.
possible,
Yeah.
and then like you're sitting there going through and then finally I was like, how many different versions of like pipes do I need to hear? So yeah, it is the same thing. It's like, well, I'm using it ethically. Well, I'm still having that same negative impact, right? Um,
And how do you define ethics?
exactly,
That's a
right.
whole nother moral question.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very easy. That's why I when I'm talking about it, I have to almost balance myself out to say, but wait a minute, I'm a heavy user of AI, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, these data centers are going to kill kill our ecosystem. But there I am using Claude every day.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping smarter people than me can help figure this out. Yeah.
I want to wrap it up in a couple minutes, but I just want to continue this conversation of AI. You mentioned the fact that you use Claude, and particularly Claude Code. Why do you prefer those as opposed to some of the other models?
So I've tried all of them, just being a technologist. I mean, ChatGPT for a while was from a generative AI perspective, I thought was really good.
Generative like photos or
Now,
generative?
generative in the sense of, upload a document and it
Oh,
turns it into something else, or it summarizes it, and or even write me a story about X, Y, and Z, and it would come up with this really interesting, kind of cool story. Um, I thought it was really good, and at the time, people talk about. like other people talk about Netscape, in the browser wars, right? ChatGPT feels to me like what Netscape was. It was really cool when it came out and it was the best at the time. And then, Google Chrome and Internet Explorer came out. So the whole browser war thing seems to be happening where we used Cursor a lot for our code generation. And I believe SpaceX just bought Cursor for like, I don't know, $1 billion or something.
Oh, another $1 billion company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was great for generating code, and we still use it along. We're always using more than one model at a time. Um, but Claude, uh, just I want to say, when was it, like 3 or 6 months? It wasn't that long ago when Claude Code came out with their desktop, thing, and I started playing around with it. It wasn't just the output. It was actually looking at the code that it produced, and it was like clean, really good code, and the fact that it could understand historically, like it remembered
Mm.
everything that I've been doing with it. It was sort of scary, but it was also amazing because it could just continuously build out really good things. So it was really just a performance thing. Claude just outshines from a code perspective any of the other ones that we've used. I also think that I haven't really done a lot with co-work yet, but I plan to. But it's chat. It's version of GPT, the Claude generative stuff. It just produces these beautiful documents. Like they just visually look really
I've heard
nice.
that. Yeah.
So I think what's happened is just, behind the scenes they were just doing something different, and they sort of cracked the code, and it's very consumer friendly. It produces prettier documents. The text is more elegant. The code is more elegant. It's
One of the
just
things that is driving me crazy in my industry, I'm in the media industry, right? Everything that I do is related to media, online media, right? Is I use chat all the time, and I've been in fact the Chat GPT came out this year at the end of the last year, actually, technically, like almost like a Spotify summary,
Mhm.
and it was like,
Yeah,
where are you as a user?
right.
I was in the top 1% of users.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Like in the world, I guess in the world, like, which is insane. Like when you think
Right.
about that, I think I had like 10,000 conversations with it last year. Like it was something
That's
ridiculous because I use
amazing.
it
Yeah.
all the time. Now, granted, I have a couple employees that use the same account, so it's not all just me, but I use it all the time.
Mhm.
That said, I've become so well versed with how it speaks that like it's driving me crazy when I'm like listening to a YouTube video. I'm like, he's reading a
Yeah.
ChatGPT script,
Yeah.
or like, and it just irks me. It just
Yeah.
has a very specific cadence, and it, like, I don't know, this world we're living in,
It
and it's
does have a
just
cadence, and I mean, basically all it's doing. I don't know how much you've looked into like how these things actually work, but
no, I don't know.
it's just guessing at what the next word should be based on what you've put. Right. So you know these hallucinations that they come with is really just because it guessed a wrong word, and then it went down a path of the next word was wrong too. It's literally just guessing what the right
Yeah,
words should be. There's a little more to it. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's generally what it's doing. And you can definitely, I can absolutely tell when something's ChatGPT. I can't so much with Claude. My
I,
kids immediately identify AI, like like they can see it immediately, and better than me. And then there's other tells like the M dash, and like there's certain things that AI just puts in there that you have to replace to make it look human. I find that it's great for giving me a start, like even just writing a blog or whatever. It gives
yeah,
me a lot of good information, and then I can write the blog
sure, yeah,
myself.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But even the way that it says this podcast, it's not this, it's not this, it's this.
Mhm.
It's just such a classic, and
Yeah.
it's driving me crazy because everything.
Yeah.
I'm watching a video about hunting. I'm watching a video about a gun. I'm watching a video about planting, and like all of it, like everybody's just using it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
can I
Well, if
just
you're on
get a real?
TikTok, a lot of the videos are just,
Oh, they're not even that. Now we're talking about AI voiceovers, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
crazy. Which is a weird thing because like part of me doesn't hate it at the same time because I'm
right.
learning things that I would probably never have learned before.
Yes,
But at the same time, I'm like, because at least I know that that's AI. When
right.
I'm watching a real person that's just reading an AI script,
Yeah, that's
it's
frustrating.
just it. Again, I don't hate that they're using it. It's just the
Yeah.
fact that it's just that I can tell.
It's
I'm
also a
like,
little lazy, right? It's
I
like,
guess, yeah. I
yeah,
don't know. I don't
yeah.
know.
No, I'm with you on that.
It's just a
And
weird time in the industry.
yeah, yeah.
And it's only because I use it so much. The average person probably has no
Would not
clue, and
notice.
which
Yeah,
is fine. But
yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's you edit enough videos and you watch a movie differently now.
Yep. Yeah, I would
You
imagine.
just see things differently.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's, I guess, an industry problem.
Yeah, well, like you said, it'll probably swing back just like auto tune, right?
Yeah,
Where it becomes a novelty.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. Well, In conclusion, I like to ask every guest the same question, wrapping it up. And that question is, what is one thing you know now in your career that you wish you knew when you first started out?
That's good. So something I know now that I wish I knew earlier. Um, I wish I was more humble. I think humility. I think I had this idea early on that when you walk in a room, you got to prove yourself right away. You got to be the smartest person there. Um, almost a little bit of a meanness to it. Like I'm going to show everybody here, and if someone steps out of line, says something wrong, I'm going to point it out to show that I know more than them. And
Hmm,
I think I think I did it out of insecurity, like it was just sort of a young, insecure place that I was coming from. But I thought I was showing how smart I was, but really I was demonstrating insecurity. And I think as I matured and got to know myself better, therapy, all of that, you start to realize, humility is actually probably your biggest advantage because you listen more. You're more willing to be wrong and admit that you're wrong and then learn from it. And you can also look at people that maybe previously you would look at and say, this person probably doesn't know that much, or the way they're dressed, or the way they're speaking, or
sure.
where they come from, or their age, right? Like there's ageism on the top end, but there's ageism on the bottom end. My co-founder is younger than me, so smart, and I've learned so much from her that uh, years ago I probably would have looked at it and said, "There's no way I'm going to learn anything from her." So I think the humility part of it is something that I've learned, and I really wish that I had carried that a lot earlier
Yeah.
in my career.
Very interesting. I haven't heard that one actually. It's a very unique.
Thanks. Yeah,
I've asked that question probably close to 300 times, and that's a very unique answer. I admire that.
I'm glad to hear
Um,
that. Yeah,
I mean, it kind of piggybacks on the phrase, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room kind of
a hundred
concept. But
percent.
like,
Yeah,
just always be willing to have an open mind is a very, very great business model.
yeah. I think it starts internally, right? Like it's just like I said, it's a maturity, and um, I think we all just bring a lot to the table.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a tough lesson to have learned, but
Yeah.
I do think I learned that lesson. At least I'm still learning it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it was a very interesting conversation. I kind of like the way that we segued into various
Yeah.
topics. But thank you so much. Where can people find more information about your company?
So the company is Speak2. The website is speak2family.com because we couldn't get the Speak2 domain. Um, but speak2family.com is the easiest way. With the name Matt Smith, you're not going to find me on social media. You're going to find 1,000 other Matt Smiths. If you look up Speak2 and Matt Smith, you'll find me. So that's the easiest way. And speak with the number two.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way to find me.
Well, wrapping it up, what would be the number one goal of Speak to?
I think we want to be part of an ecosystem where what we're doing is ubiquitous, whether it's us or us along with others. I think anybody who is in the aging industry, who's in senior housing, should have either Speak to or someone just like us.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been
Thanks so much. Great
yeah,
conversation. Yeah.
very cool. Thank
Yeah.
you.